Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fall 2020 CXM Best Practices Symposium. My name is Ian Williams, and today I am going to be talking to you about customer experience from end to end, viewing CX as a data-driven, customer-led business transformation exercise. I have been running a consultancy called Jericho in the UK for the past 11 years, hence my really strange accent. But without further ado, I'm going to jump straight into the presentation. So here we go. Share screen, and off we go. So now you get to see me twice on the screen. So why should we do customer experience management? Why is it so important? Well, you may have seen these figures before, but every year an organization called Watermark does a study that looks at the correlation between, or the relationship between, companies that perform well from a CX perspective, be that NPS, CSAT, and their performance within the market. And year on year, the statistic shows the same thing. Those organizations who perform well from an NPS perspective also perform well from a financial perspective as well. And as I said, it's not a one-off. This happens year after year after year. So if this isn't proof that investment in customer experience management isn't worthwhile, I don't know what it is. Before we dive into the talk, I want to talk about CX principles. And what I mean by that is the things that we need to bear in mind to give us the right mentality, mindset, and philosophy when we're approaching customer experience as an exercise. So first thing, I always say customer experience is something that customer gets. Very often people mix up customer experience and customer service, and they're not necessarily the same thing. Of course, customer experience is something that the organization delivers, whereas customer experience is something the customer experiences. Okay, and we need to clearly differentiate between the two. Of course, customer experience management is what the organization does to manage the customer's experience, but customer experience is what the customer gets. Where does it come from? So the experience of a customer is driven by more than just customer service. It can come from, for example, the product. With Apple, most of your positive experience comes as a result of the product, i.e. the handset. With, for example, Amazon, most of your positive experience comes from the channel. Of course, you are delivered products, but is it really the products that give you a great experience? Not really, because you can buy those products anywhere. Is it the customer service that you receive? Well, not really. It's all about the experience in the channel, i.e. how easy is it to order the products, how easy is it to pay for the products, and how easy is it to get those products delivered. So it's mainly the channel experience. And then, of course, it can also come from service experience. So you look at airlines such as Emirates and Sri Lankan and those airlines that are considered to be, you know, really, really world class. The great experience you get as a customer mainly comes from the service with that organization. So service isn't just the only thing that contributes to customer experience. Customer experience comes from the products, the channels, and the service experiences. The customer's experience is impacted by everything the organization does. So again, it's not just the service. It could be a pushy salesman or inaccurate advertising or a false bill or a billing error. It could be a faulty product. It could be poor customer service. It could be a late delivery. So again, all of these things have an impact upon the customer's experience. It's more than service. It's everything that the business does. So who in your business is responsible for customer experience? Of course, you might have employees who are tasked with customer experience management, but that doesn't mean that they have sole control, exclusive control in customer experience. Because everything the business does impacts the customer's experience, everyone in your business has to be responsible for it. Of course, it makes perfect sense. So you can forget customer experience. Now at this stage, you might be going, is this guy a loony? He's just telling us how important customer experience is, and now he's telling us that we should forget it. Well, we can forget it because the organization doesn't deliver the customer's experience. Your people do. So you can forget great customer experience without great employee experience. How can you expect your people to do well in terms of what they delivering the customer experience unless they are getting a great experience themselves? And employee experience isn't just about rah-rah. It's not just about employee engagement and woohoo, let's do it, guys. It has to be more than that. It has to be substantial. It has to be substantive. So you can forget profit without great customer experience. So you can see here on the right hand side, this is what's called the service profit chain, and it makes the argument that if your employees are happy, they will deliver a good customer experience, and if your customers are happy, they will deliver sales and profits back to your organization. So forget customer experience without great employee experience. So now we have employee experience and customer experience standing hand in hand, looking romantically across the beautiful sunset view. But great employee experience is not a guarantee of great customer experience. Of course, you can't deliver a great customer experience unless you deliver great employee experience. But just because you have great employee experience, it isn't a guarantee of great customer experience, because there are other things as well as employee experience that can impact the customer's experience. If your organization's strategy is wrong, or your leadership approach isn't right, or your culture is askew, or the promise that you're making customers doesn't match up with the reality of what they experience, then you're not going to have a great customer experience, and there's nothing that your employee experience can do about that. So now we've spoken about these principles, these things that help us get into the right mind space, have the right philosophy and attitude and approach to customer experience. We now need to think about the approach that we take towards changing customers' experiences. This is what I call the CX ecosystem. It's a holistic picture of customer experience management from end to end. That's the discipline within the middle, but you've got different rings to customer experience. So right at the center, we have CX. That is the experience that the customer has. The orange ring around the yellow are the tools that we can use to change the customer's experience. And I said earlier, it's not just about service, it's about your product proposition, it's about your channel experiences as well. The discipline is the process that we go through to change customers' experience from good to bad, and there are different steps in that process. Today's presentation is going to be focusing on those different steps. And then, of course, around the outside, I spoke about the principles, which you can see here in the purple circle, and there are 11 principles that we at Jericho talk about. But in addition to those principles, there are also determinants. The determinants are things that impact customer experience management without being directly involved. So things like strategy and your data quality and employee experience and culture that I've already mentioned in part on the previous slide. So I talk about customer experience as being a data-driven, customer-led business transformation exercise. But what does that really mean? Well, most organizations, if they're going to do some kind of customer experience activity, start with journey mapping. This may be the start and the end of what they do. I have spoken to organizations who've said to me before, yeah, we want you to help us with customer experience, but we don't want you to do journey mapping. And I've said, well, why? One organization said, well, we've done it 3 times already and nothing changed. And I said, okay. I went and sat down and I talked with them, and we worked out the reason why nothing had changed, because the output of the journey mapping exercise was a map. And I always say the map is not the point. There's more to the map. The map is a byproduct of the exercise. So journey mapping isn't the start and beginning of customer experience. It's a key part, but it's certainly not the start and beginning. If some organizations get particularly sophisticated and they realize that within their customer base, not all customers are the same. So they might split the customer base up into different personas. So by splitting the customer base into, say, for example, here we see 8 personas, this suggests that we then need 8 different journey maps. So this is the next level of sophistication. Some organizations do journey mapping, but they do it for different personas. But if this is as far as you take it, you're not really going to be able to transform the business. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves the question, how do you identify which of your new or existing customers belongs to which persona? Now, I've seen personas exercises undertaken in a workshop where people sit there going, well, what do we believe our different personas are? And they workshop and they theorize the different groups of customer. The problem is with this exercise is if that exercise isn't based on data, there's no way of being able to say, how does this customer that we know exists belong to which persona? How do we choose which persona that they belong to? Without the data, you can't necessarily do that. So we advocate the fact that your personas, which is an emotional view of different groups of customers, need to be built on the back of customer segments. And you can't create customer segments unless you have accurate customer profiles. So we start with profiles, accurate view of individual customers. Then we use the profiles to build customer segments, accurate view of customers at a rational level, groups of customers at a rational level. We evolve those segments into personas and we do journey mapping. However, as we said, the map is not the point. How do you change your business according to what you learn from a journey mapping exercise? The map isn't the point. What the point is the identification of issues and opportunities that you find in the journey mapping exercise in order to then use those issues and opportunities to transform the business. Once the business is transformed, then you have to monitor the ongoing performance of that business. So we see this as an end-to-end process, broken down into 3 distinct sections, and those are data-driven, customer-led, business transformation, which is where the phrase comes from. So if we look at what we've just seen on the previous slide in a different way, we start with profiling. We develop what we call strategic segments. These are different to tactical segments that you might use in marketing, and I'll explain that in a bit. We evolve, excuse me, we evolve the strategic segments into personas, which is about layering emotional information around those strategic segments. For each of the different personas, we undertake journey mapping exercises, because one group of customers are not going to follow the same journey as another group of customers. Following journey mapping, we then go through a process called functional alignment. This is getting the different functions of your business, the different departments within your business, to align with this new approach, to align with the output from the customer journey mapping exercise. However, the next thing we then need to do, once we've got the functions on board, we have to take what we've learned from journey mapping and go into some kind of transformation exercise. However, we can't transform unless we know what we're transforming against. So we also have to go through a process of what we called brand promise. This is where an organization makes a promise to its customers through its brand, and then it delivers against that promise through its product, services, and channels. So whenever we do a transformation exercise, it has to be done in the context of the brand promise. So we have to make sure that these 2 steps align with each other. And then finally, performance management and monitoring. So these are the 8 steps that we follow as a customer experience discipline. So first of all, customer profiling. Customer profiling, this first step in the process, really what it's about doing is it's about taking data from different parts of your business, financial data, transactional records, CRM data, complaints data, web cookie data, for example, and pulling them all together so that we can have a single view of an individual customer. So Ian Williams is the customer, and an organization will have information about my finances, they will have my transactional records, they'll have information within complaints data, but what they need to do is they need to pull all those different pieces of data together to create a single view of Ian Williams, and that is what a profile is. Organizations go through a process like this when they're building CRM systems from disparate pieces of data across their organization. Then we create a trial population, we test that, we might run 2 or 3 calibrations in order to improve the matching quality. Strategic segmentation. So as I said before, this is different from tactical segmentation. It differs quite significantly. So if we think about marketing, they might say, okay, we need to pull some data from the database because we want to do a marketing campaign to all men over 50. That's tactical marketing. What strategic marketing is about taking your entire customer base and breaking it down according to the reasons why customers do business with you. I'll come into that in more detail in a second. So why do organizations fail to offer consistently good customer experiences today? We often hear about silos. So we all know silos on farms where they store grain and stuff like that. And the word silos is used to demonstrate different functions working in different ways and not really relating to each other. So why do these silos exist? Well, one of the main reasons is because if you look at the different functions of their business, they can already claim to be customer focused. And what I mean by that is you speak to sales and say, well, are you customer focused? They say, yeah, of course we are. We look at customers according to the channels that they come to us through. So we look at direct customers versus indirect customers. We look at online customers versus offline customers. Operations usually organize their work around the products that are sold to customers. So on an airline, you organize what you do according to first class, business class, economy, premium economy. Finance might look at customers by splitting them up into different customer lifetime values. Loyalty might do it by tier. So customers who belong to the loyalty scheme versus those who don't. And those who do, we break them down into gold, silver, bronze. So each function could already argue that they're customer focused. The problem is they're all doing it differently. And if they're all doing it differently, how can you deliver that consistently good customer experience across your organization? In addition to that, you might have your marketer somewhere in a room creating psychographic persona. Psychographics is all about attitudes and beliefs, but there's nothing wrong with psychographics as a research technique, that's fine. But often psychographics gets used as a workshopping technique, people sitting in a room and brainstorming what the different attitudes and beliefs of their customer groups are. The problem is if this is not backed up by data, how can you make a decision as to which of your individual customers belongs to which persona that you've created? So unless you can tie those two things together, psychographic persona can be a paper exercise. And then thirdly, we have behavioral strategic customer segments. That's a process that we at Jericho follow. And what we're doing is we're taking the entire customer base and breaking it down according to the reason why customers are doing business with us. However, the problem is that today there is no connection between these three different approaches. In addition to that, there's no connection between the ways that the different functions are segmenting according to their own functional logic. So everybody's doing it in a different way. How do we tie it together? Well, the answer to this is about data. But as we've already said, most organizations don't have a large amount of psychographic data. Most of them have reams and reams of transactional and interactional data, which is one of the reasons why when we do segmentation, we do behavioral strategic segmentation, because you can derive customer behaviors from transactional and interactional data. Why should we care about the fact that each of the different functions is segmenting the customer base differently? Well, your customer base and segmentation, your customer base is like a cake and segmentation is like a knife. We give each of the functions the knife, they are going to cut the cake in a different way. So if different businesses apply different segmentation approaches, if they segment in different ways, they do it in order to make their work easier, to manage the workload around common and homogeneous groups of customers according to their own functional logic. However, if everybody's doing it differently, in this presentation I used with airlines, if each organization segments differently, you're unable to provide a consistent and aligned treatment strategy across the functions, which of course contributes towards customer churn. So this is what happens when everybody cuts the cake differently. You end up with a pile of crumbs. So let's have a look at the right way of segmenting. So today, as we said, different functions are segmenting in different ways. So the white lines could be sales, the blue lines could be, say, finance, and they're doing it in a completely different way. We can see the pile of crumbs is starting to develop. So what we really need to do is find the best way of dividing the customer base into common homogeneous groups from the customer's perspective, not ours. We use, at Jericho, we advocate behavioral segmentation in order to achieve this. Once you've done this, you can identify the segments that don't positively contribute to the bottom line. That doesn't mean that you actively avoid targeting them. It doesn't mean that you stop serving them, but it does mean that you can actively avoid targeting them if they are not your core customers. In addition to this, we can potentially identify more profitable segments that we're currently not serving or completely underserving. And then finally, what we do is we take each of these individual strategic segments and we give them to the functions. So rather than a function taking the entire customer base and breaking it down according to their functional segmentation logic, we give the functions a strategic segment and then say, take the strategic segment, now apply your functional segmentation logic to that strategic segment. And I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail later on about how we do that. I'm going to use an airline case study because this is one that we've done most recently. Amadeus, we've done a lot of work with airlines over the past 4 or 5 years. So the strategic segmentation exercise we do, the process that we follow is that we run a theoretical segmentation exercise, which gets people in a room and says, what are the 6 to 8 main reasons why customers travel with you? This is a theoretical exercise, but we start this process in order that we can then use analytical data techniques in order to identify customers in reality. We take a whole bunch of output from this exercise and we throw it into a clustering algorithm. So we use machine learning to develop unsupervised clusterers through a technique called k-means analysis. The third step in the process is to say, okay, the clusters that we've got now from unsupervised clustering, can we match them to the theoretical segments that we've come up with in the first place? So the first step in the process, let's identify these theoretical segments. And when we did this recently with One Airline, they came up with 21 sub-segments. So eight business sub-segments, 13 leisure sub-segments. These were theoretical. We had no proof that these people existed. We took data from this exercise and we threw it into a clustering exercise. And as a result of that, these were the actual customer segments that were identified. We identified 2 business segments and 8 leisure segments. Now, these 6 leisure segments, 2 business segments. These 8 segments broke down into a further 21 subsegments. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, he's mentioned 21 before. Do these 21 subsegments match the 21 theoretical subsegments that we came up with in the first place? The answer is no. Some don't match, but we had a pretty good theoretical view as what the customers look like. And now this is an actual view of the 21 different reasons why customers fly with the airline. And these 21 subsegments group together into the 8 segments that we spoke about previously, 6 leisure, 2 business. So these are real groups of customers, real data showing us the reasons why customers are flying on the aeroplane. We go through a matching exercise to make sure that the theorized reasons and the segments that were identified match with each other. And then we had to go through the process of pulling different pieces of information together to get a much more accurate picture. The next stage, once we have a clear and accurate view of our customer segments, which is a data-driven exercise, as I said, we have to evolve those segments into personas. Now, this is about layering in emotional information. Let me give you an example. This particular woman belongs to the business commuter subsegment. Now, the business commuter is somebody who gets on a plane on a Monday morning to fly to work. They stay away from home Monday to Friday, and then on Friday evening, they get on a plane and fly back home. So this is a typical business commuter. We can tell that from the data about this person. Not only is she a business commuter most of the time, sometimes she's also a vacationer. She goes on holiday with her husband and her kids. But what we need to remember, on a Monday morning, her motivations are logical. She needs to get to work as quickly as possible because her boss is not going to be happy if she misses the 11 o'clock meeting. However, on a Friday night, is she still a business commuter? Well, of course she is. She belongs to the segment. But what we mean by that is that on a Friday night, don't try and sell her Wi-Fi access because she's a business person. She's been away from her husband, her kids, her parents, her boyfriend, I don't know, all week. So at that point, she's no longer a business commuter. She's a mum, she's a daughter, she's a sister, she's a wife, she's a girlfriend. So don't try and sell her Wi-Fi access. You'll be better off trying to sell her a bottle of champagne. Now, data's not going to tell you that, which is why it's so important to evolve your segments into personas to layer in that emotional information about the customer. We're going to look at what we did with the airline that I mentioned before. We go through the process of identifying the strategic segment statistics, the demographics, understanding their behaviors. But then we put ourselves into the shoes of the customer, and then we identify emotional and rational behaviors for each customer segment. And then we create what we call a persona from that exercise. So this is a chronological view of customers emotionally and rationally for each customer segment. And that's what a persona is. We then take each of these personas and do what we call a journey mapping exercise. Now, as I said before, journey mapping isn't about the map. What we're really doing when we're journey mapping is identifying issues and opportunities. So a journey mapping exercise, we conduct it looking at pain points and opportunities for 3 specific customer segments. So of the 8 segments we identified for this airline, they wanted us to focus on 3. So we led with 3 of their main personas. Then what we did is we built what we call a journey framework. Sometimes we call this the journey wheel, which is the different stages and steps, generic stages and steps that a customer might go through. We identify the channels and touch points, and then we identify 4 different things: pain points, moments of truth, commercial opportunities, and wow opportunities. Let me tell you what we mean by those 4 things. Before I do that, I want to tell you that the people we had in the room were only frontline people. I don't let senior and middle management people into the room. The only people I want in the room are the people who deal with customers on a day-to-day basis, because they have the best view of what customers experience. Then, of course, we'll use the journey framework, as I said, and this is one that we developed for the airline industry. But whichever sector that we work with, we go through the process of identifying a generic journey framework that helps guide us through the customer journey exercise. Then what we do is, for each stage and step of the journey and for each persona that we're looking at, we look at pain points. These are delivery low points as experienced by the customer. Moments of truth, these are expectation high points as experienced by the customer. So a moment of truth could be a pain point, but it's a pain point at which the customer will judge that overall experience based on their expectation at that particular moment in the journey. We also look at commercial opportunities. So there may be an opportunity to sell customers a product to improve their experience. Selling people things isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it can improve the experience. And then finally, wow opportunities. These are moments in the journey where we might consider exceeding the customer's expectations. I would always caution against doing that. You shouldn't over wow, but wowing occasionally at different moments in the journey can actually be a positive experience. Next of all, from doing the journey mapping exercise, looking at the pain points and the moments of truth and the wow opportunities and the commercial opportunities, we identified 400 things that the organization could look at changing. And of those 400, 220 of them were pain points. So the other 180 fell into the other 3 categories that I've previously mentioned. The next step that we go through is what we call functional alignment. How do we get the different functions of the organization on board with what we're trying to achieve? So functional alignment, if we say, for example, we went to the loyalty department and said, look, we have a new way of looking at customers. We have this strategic approach. We want you to look at business commuters and leisure travelers and da-da-da-da-da-da. And they're going to turn around and say, forget it. We've already got our own approach to segmentation, which is non-members, gold, silver, bronze. Forget it. We're not going to apply a different segmentation approach. How do you get around this issue of having a functional approach to segmentation, which makes sense, and then introducing this secondary approach that sits across everything the organization does? This is how we do it. So we take the customer base. How do we segment it? Subsegment. So you might split into leisure and business. Within business, some of it is international. And then within the international business travelers, some of them are commuters. So we pull out this specific strategic segment, we give it to the loyalty department and say, take this strategic segment and now apply your functional logic to this group of commuters. So they split it down into premium members, entry members, and non-members. And then we say, well, what does this mean for the business commuters? What do business commuters really care about? As part of journey mapping, we've identified, for example, that commuters would really love to have a speed through airport experience. Commuters travel much more frequently than any other type of traveler. And therefore for them, nobody likes spending time in airports, but for them, getting in and out of the airport, on and off the plane, more quickly than everybody else is more important than any other type of traveler. So offering commuters a service where they can speed through the airport at either end would be a service. And I've been a commuter, so I can speak on behalf of this group. This is a service that you would welcome looking at. So premium members, for example, might be able to get this service based on their tier status. They might, even if they have enough points, be able to acquire the service through points redemption. Entry members could get the same service, but maybe as a paid for loyalty package. And then finally, non-members. Now, you wouldn't offer this to all non-members, but about 10% of non-members are typically loyal flyers. What I mean by that is they're very loyal to you. They fly with you very frequently, but they're not members of your loyalty scheme for some reason. What you could do with these people, because these people, you want them to be members of your loyalty scheme because they're loyal, but they're not engaging with you, but maybe they're too rich, they don't care. But if you could turn around to them and say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to give you this service for free using the points that you would have accrued had you been a member for the last 3 years. But the one condition is that you have to enroll to the program in order to be able to acquire this service. Now, all of a sudden, the loyalty scheme to me as a high value non-member suddenly becomes relevant because the speed through service is something that I value. So all of a sudden, the loyalty team can start to understand the benefit of having this two-layered segmentation approach to what they're trying to achieve. So this focuses on the primary motivation and need of the customer, which is to get through the airport as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the loyalty scheme becomes directly relevant to the commuter customer because it uses their primary motivation to stimulate their loyalty behavior. But of course, we need all functions of the business to behave like this in order to make it work. But now you can suddenly see how it is possible to align a functional segmentation approach with a strategic segmentation approach. And if you do that effectively, you fundamentally get rid of siloed thinking between the different functions of the business, because not only are these different functions focusing on their own functional approach, they are all focusing on the same strategic approach at the same time. Next of all, we can look at transformation support. So how can we at Jericho, how do we go about helping organizations go through the change process? So as I said, we might identify, for example, 400 different things from the journey mapping exercise. We first of all have to prioritize those according to how easy or difficult is it going to be to implement versus how important is this to the organization. So those things which are of high importance and easy to implement fly to the top right hand corner, and those things enter your quick wins program. Those things which are very, very difficult to implement and which are of low importance end up in the bottom left hand corner, and they will maybe get deprioritized and may even potentially fall away completely. But this is what we get. You can't tackle all 400 things at once. We use a prioritization matrix to create different phases of your customer experience transformation program. So what are the different transformation programs? As I said, we might have a quick wins program. We might do business process engineering. So we might look at processes that already exist and then re-engineering them in order to improve the experience that the customers get. Of course, there's a lot of talk nowadays about agile service design approaches. So service thinking is all about how can we design product, services, and channels with a customer mentality in mind. And using the agile approach means that we're not creating this enormous transformation program that's likely to fail. What we're doing is we're doing it in short agile design sprints. So this is a new approach to transformation that has a significantly better success rate. And then finally, personalization. Often some organizations decide that they're going to have dedicated personalization programs as well. Brand promise, as I said before, it's not just about changing your organization, it's making sure that the way in which you change it aligns with the promise that you're making the customer. So when we talk about brand promise, we need to think about the way that customers perceive their experience. So most customers perceive whether they've had a good or bad experience based on the gap between what they expected to get and what they perceived that they actually received in reality. Now, their perception is going to be governed by the product, channel, and service experiences, which we've already spoken about, but their expectation is, to a large degree, going to be governed by the brand. But what do we mean by a brand? I talk about the brand onion because it's much more than image or identity. A brand has layers. So on the outside, you have the image. That's the way the organization portrays itself. The next layer down is identity, which is the way that the customer recognizes the image of the organization. The next layer down is the promise. So this is the brand is a promise that you make to the customer, but right at the very heart, even deeper than promise, is the reputation. So this is the promise as sensed by the customer. So Gartner, for example, a number of years ago, because brand was being misunderstood, because people think about logos and all that fluffy, sexy stuff associated with branding. Because of the misunderstanding of branding, they stopped using the word brand and they started using the word reputation, because fundamentally that's what a brand is. It's about the organization making a promise and laying their reputation on the line. So customer experience is about making a promise to customers, laying your reputation on the line, and then delivering against that promise through your products, service, and channel experiences. Okay. Finally, performance monitoring. So performance monitoring is all about once you've gone through transformation, once you've gone through change, once you've ensured that the change that you've introduced aligns with the promise you're making your customers, then you have to monitor whether the business is continuing to perform in the right way. So there are different techniques. One is voice of the customer. There are lots of different platforms out there. You've heard of Medallia, Qualtrics, Confirm It, all these organizations, Nice, InMoment, etc. All of them having VOC platforms. Then there is CX Dashboard. This is a slightly different approach. This is a mixture of internal operational measures plus external customer-facing measures like CSAT and NPS, etc. Another process, you've heard of mystery shopping, which is where you pretend to be a customer, walk in the shoes of the customer in order to understand the experience that a customer gets. And then finally, balanced scorecard. Usually what we find is that a balanced scorecard at a board level, we will include in the customer quadrant of a balanced scorecard, we will, if we can, introduce these other three measures within that balanced scorecard approach. So when we implement the VOC system, what we do is we make sure that the VO system aligns with the customer journey framework that we've created prior to doing the customer journey mapping exercise. So this is a sum up of the 8 steps of customer experience transformation for you, just to summarize what we've been speaking about. I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time. I welcome you all to join us now for the question and answer session if you'd like to ask any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.